Thank you all for coming today, and as you might guess from hearing my background as a personal consumer, I certainly spend a lot of my time trying to practice what I preach and reducing my footprint and shopping with the environment and human health more in mind. Just as an example, my two boys have recently become very, very interested in how their hair looks and how they smell. And so, of course, that means Dad has to help them shop to find personal care products that I'm comfortable with them putting on their person for whatever purposes in middle school and elementary school that they're now being so interested in having that. And it takes a little longer to shop with Dad because I tend to read more labels and look for more eco-labels because of what I do for a living. But finding more sustainable products is not always that easy, unlike when you go to a restaurant and you see the letter grade right there very clearly telling you the sanitation rating for that restaurant, or if you're buying an electrical appliance of some sort where you can go to the end of the plug and look for the little hologram sticker to tell you that that's been certified for electrical safety. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work. And how do you know if something really is as green as it's claiming it is or as you want it to be? So one of the ways that we do that in other areas of our life is by asking trusted third parties. It's particularly when we're shopping with our values or spending a lot of money on something. So cars, buying a car is a good example, buying a diamond engagement ring is another one, and buying a house. So if you're buying a diamond engagement ring, you're spending a couple months' salary on something, the jeweler says this is a great stone, but you want that third-party certificate that tells you it's the right cut, carat, clarity, and what's the other one? I forget the fourth C. It's been a while since I bought my engagement ring. But same thing when you buy a house, the bank's going to want to do an independent appraisal to make sure it's worth what they think it's worth with their third-party appraiser. You're probably going to want to get a home inspection from a third party because the seller says it's a great house, we've never had any problems, but occasionally you do find some things. And then our 2005 minivan recently died, so we had the lovely experience of buying a new used car for our family. And nobody really loves to go car shopping, so luckily you can use a trusted third party. You can buy a certified pre-owned, which has gone through an extensive checklist to give you that comfort. If you're buying something out of the classifieds, maybe you bring your Uncle Frank, who's really good with cars, or you bring your mechanic, a trusted third party, to make sure the car really is what you think it is, because you're spending a lot of money. So this is something that we're very used to doing, but what about the smaller purchases or purchases now where we're shopping with our values for health or environmental reasons? And that's where third-party eco-labels can help. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a network of eco-labels from all around the world that can really help you identify what green really means. And about a party that we're having in just a few short weeks here to celebrate the first annual World Eco-Label Day. Now, I can't guarantee that your boss is going to give you that day off, but please feel free to advocate for that. It's the first one, so there's no historical precedent. But we're really celebrating the power of certified green products to build that trust with consumers who want to shop and look for more sustainable products. The power of third-party eco-labels to protect against greenwashing or false green claims, which unfortunately there's still a lot of out there, and the power to provide superior environmental performance. And we'll talk about all these as we go through today. But the Global Ecolabeling Network is that organization, and they've been linking consumers to a world of environmentally preferable products now for a quarter of a century. And that's very exciting, and I've been privileged to be a part of that. So each one of these little red pins is one of the programs that's a member of the Global Ecolabeling Network, and currently there are 27 eco-labels from all around the world representing nearly 60 countries and territories. And new programs are joining all the time, which is exciting. As new programs emerge, we want to make sure that they're among the brotherhood of credible ones and not necessarily the fluffy ones. So these members are all third-party sustainability certifications that award their seal of approval only after their rigorous environmental standards have been met. That's the only way you can get these seals of approval. So these certification labels, or eco-labels for short, are based collectively on about 1,500 different standards that these 27 programs have developed for a wide range of product and service categories, and they can be found on over 600,000 products sold all over the world. This idea, however, of certifying products that meet some sort of a higher environmental standard is not a new one. The Blue Angel program in Germany, for example, is the oldest member of the Global Ecolabeling Network, and they've been doing this for over 40 years. So this idea has been around for a while. We're just continuing to educate folks on which are the good guys that you can trust. The European Union Ecolabel, official certification for the EU members, sometimes called the EU flower because of the look. There's nearly 4,000 companies that have received certification from the China Environmental Labeling Program for their products and services. And the two US-based members of GEN, Ecologo and Green Seal, are specified in the procurement guidelines of more than half of the 50 US states for things like cleaning products, paper products, and paint. Now, according to the International Organization for Standardization, which is also known as ISO, these type of life cycle multi-attribute GEN member labels are referred to as Type 1 ecolabels. And a Type 1 ecolabel, as defined by ISO, is a voluntary, multiple criteria-based third-party certification that identifies environmentally preferable products when compared to other products of the same type using a life cycle basis. Got it? Pretty straightforward there. So in contrast to vague green symbols that a lot of products have on their labels these days, or logos that manufacturers create for their own products and put on as part of their marketing, these labels are only found on products that have met these rigorous environmental standards and proved that they meet them through this unbiased third party. Now, if you shopped anytime recently, you know there are hundreds of green labels that you will see on retail products, but also on hotels, on restaurants, and cleaning services. The Ecolabel Index, which is a website that lists ecolabels that are out in the marketplace, currently lists 463 different ecolabels in over 200 countries. Having so many logos and seals is part of why we're here today, because it makes it very difficult to know which ecolabels you can trust. So what makes the ISO Type 1 Global Ecolabeling Network members different? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, to give you some tools to help you sort through the hundreds that are out there, because there certainly are not hundreds of good ones. So here are some of the highlights. The first one is the certification has to be based on a standard. We all remember standardized testing from our high school days. Everybody takes the same test. Everybody gets a uniform score. Colleges and universities can know SAT score from one person to the next. It's comparable. So the same thing when it comes to environmental standards. It's a detailed list of requirements that the product or service has to meet in order to receive that third-party certification. This is important because the manufacturer needs to know exactly what their product has to do to get that seal of approval, but also from a consumer standpoint or a purchaser standpoint, if you see that ecolabel on a product, you need to be able to find out exactly what that product or service had to do to get that seal of approval. So there has to be a standard. Now, developing the standard has to be an open and transparent process. It has to be inclusive so that the public is welcome to give input as you go through the process. Anyone who has a care or information about that product should be invited to participate. So this can be the manufacturers of the product, it can be government agencies who regulate the product, it can be consumer advocacy organizations, it can be academia that have done studies or research. There's a lot of universities that specialize in one type of product or another. Public health organizations, consumer organizations, anybody that has a stake in that product should be invited to be a stakeholder. And if you haven't ever gone through a public standard development process, it's a very fun thing. It makes for excellent bedtime reading, all the background documents, things like that. If you're having trouble sleeping, I highly recommend standard development. But this standard, as you're developing, it has to address key environmental impacts. And what that means is it has to address significant impacts over the life cycle of the product. If you're looking at the life cycle of the product and only addressing things sort of on the outer edge or the fringe, it's not really a meaningful standard that's going to affect some change in the marketplace. And so this life cycle perspective is everything from the raw material extraction, the mining, the harvesting of raw materials, how the product is manufactured, how is it packaged, how do you use it, how do you service or maintain it, and then at the end of its life, how do you recycle it or safely or effectively dispose of it in some way. So anything that is within that life cycle that's a key impact should be included in that environmental standard. And if you just focus on one, like recycled content, which is a frequent one that you may see, you may be missing other impacts that have bigger human health or environmental issues in the marketplace. But manufacturers are certainly happy to sort of tout the one good green thing about their product, but when you start asking life cycle questions, it often becomes a very quiet conversation. So wouldn't you want to know that somebody is actually looking at all of these life cycle impacts of the products and services that you're buying? And once you start thinking about these things, it's almost impossible to turn it off, as my kids and wife will tell you. It takes a lot longer to shop with Dad because I look at things a little bit differently. So the standard also has to consider the functional performance of products. And this is important because so many green products over the years have been introduced that did not work as well. And people bought them, and they tried them, and they were frustrated, and they sort of wrote off the whole idea of we're going to buy green products. So we want to continue to try to bust that myth that if you want to be a conscientious consumer, you have to sacrifice performance, because that's just not the case. Now, just like any other purchasing, you may have to try 2 or 3 brands that meet your softness preference or your color preference or the availability in your local marketplace. But it's not just because it's green that it's not going to work. And if you have to use more of a product, or if you're dissatisfied and you throw half the product away, that's not very sustainable. And as I said before, if you buy something and your laundry doesn't get clean, or you have to put 7 coats of paint on the wall and it was a green product, you're going to be pretty grumpy and you're going to tell lots of friends. So we're still trying to get past that hurdle. Eco-labeled products have to meet functional performance requirements, that they work as well as their conventional or non-green counterparts. Otherwise, they're not really an option for most purchasers and consumers. Now, the standard also has to be publicly available so that you can find out, as we said before, what that product had to do to get that certification. The label is really meaningless if you can't find out what the criteria were in order to get that certification. This is one of the first clues when you start diving into the world of eco-labels. If you can't find out the criteria upon which that certification is based, that usually is an indication it may not be that robust. And you want these standards to be publicly available so that it's not a black box with some sort of mysterious set of requirements. You put a product in one end and out the other end comes the certification, or even a gray box, because that does call into question where are they getting their funding, how are they issuing the certification, is that label really meaningful? So the standard also needs to be updated regularly because the marketplace changes from time to time. There's new raw materials, there's new developments. So what's leadership today in 2018, 2 or 3 years from now may not be leadership anymore. So the standards have to be updated on a regular basis to keep up with recognizing environmental leadership. Earning the eco-label also has to be voluntary. We have sort of a good baseline regulatory framework out there. Every product has to meet in order to be sold legally in the marketplace. But this is about environmental leadership, going above and beyond just minimum compliance with regulations. And so this is part of how companies can demonstrate their leadership by achieving these third-party certifications. But in order for this to really make a difference in the marketplace, the standard and the certification also have to be attainable. So if you set the standard so high that only one product out of thousands can meet it, that's not really going to move the needle very much. And if you set it too low, same thing. If everybody gets it, it doesn't really mean much. So you're trying to find the sweet spot of leadership in today's marketplace, given the raw materials and manufacturing that's available to us in 2018. And the manufacturers, when they're looking to get this certification, it needs to be affordable for them. It can't be so high that only a few large companies can get it. You really want to get that critical mass of products, especially when it comes to business procurement or institutional procurement, where they have a minimum bid requirement, where they have to get multiple vendors to solicit bids. If there's only one company with the certification, that doesn't really help. One of my former colleagues at Green Seal used to say all the time that one of the things that she loved about her job was that when she worked with a company to go through the process of certification, even when they had to make changes, that oftentimes the company might have been a little frustrated doing it, but once they did it and had that green product and got it launched with the third-party eco-label, they were very rarely ever going to go back to the way they did things before. So achieving these credible third-party certifications actually brings about meaningful, lasting change in the marketplace, which is what these are as voluntary market tools. It's not a regulation. You don't have to do it, but we're trying to identify those leadership products and get more people to buy and use them. So lastly, the eco-label needs to be awarded using independent third-party verification. And this is probably the most important part. You can have a great standard that was developed through an open, public, transparent process. It hits lots of key, significant environmental and human health impacts over the life cycle. But if they're not doing verification in a credible way, then that really means the eco-label doesn't have much meaning behind it. And so what does this verification mean? Well, this often looks at things like the full product formulation, working up and down the supply chain to get additional disclosures from raw material suppliers. You may or may not be surprised to find out how many companies sell products where they don't actually know everything that goes into their product. So obtaining those additional disclosures is a part of the certification. Interpreting test results. If there's performance testing required or biodegradability testing, making sure that those test results meet the criteria in the standard. Inspecting the manufacturing facility. That was something I used to love to do. Putting on safety glasses and hard hats and ear protection, and making sure that the companies are actually manufacturing what they told you on paper that they were manufacturing, and that the batch records match up, and that they've bought the right quantities of raw materials to make the right quantities of finished products. And then reviewing product labels and marketing literature. So you've looked at all of their performance claims, environmental claims, human health claims, but somehow, some way, sometimes the marketing folks get a little excited, and there may be things in their literature that were not substantiated by the review that you did as part of the certification. So making sure that there's no unsubstantiated human health or environmental claims for which that company didn't have data to support it. Because at the end of the day, that third-party eco-label represents trust to the consumers relying upon that. So for a service like a restaurant or a hotel, it's a lot of stuff back of the house, looking at purchasing records, talking to staff, reviewing the training that they've been through, and utility records, service schedules, menus to make sure that they're actually serving the items that are more sustainable food than not. And all of this sometimes takes weeks, sometimes months, but it's important to go through this lengthy and validating process because ultimately the eco-label has to get it right. Otherwise, there's no trust behind it. So these are the types of things that are hallmarks of the eco-labels who are members of the Global Ecolabeling Network. And most of our members will tell you they love to say they do all of the scientific research, the inspection, and the review for you. So all you have to do when shopping is look for the eco-label. Who wouldn't want that? Now, this is a similar map, but these are the actual logos for the member labels of the Global Ecolabeling Network. And they represent some of the most credible third-party certifications available worldwide for products and services. And now you know how to look for, and now you know which ones to look for. But GEN also has affiliate members who are not eco-labels themselves, but who are organizations who support the important role that credible third-party eco-labels can use in purchasing and operations. And Google is actually an affiliate member of the Global Ecolabeling Network. So we need eco-labels like this because people care about their health. They care about their kids, they care about the planet, but they really want confirmation that what they're buying is what they think they're buying. And this is a role that these credible environmental standards and certifications can provide. Now, when we talk about the life cycle of a product, it's also nice to link that these life cycle criteria also are related to these bigger campaigns that we find and issues of our day. So eco-labels that consider the life cycle of a product can help address climate change, overflowing landfills and poisoning of groundwater from improper disposal, the overwhelming amount of plastic waste that we keep hearing more and more about, the destruction of habitat and natural resources. And considering the life cycle, it varies depending on product to product, but these are sort of the major buckets that the life cycle look always includes. So when we talk about reducing the extraction and use of fossil fuels, some of that is pretty obvious when you think about the product's manufacturing, that you're mining raw materials, you're transporting those raw materials, there's some sort of chemical or mechanical process in making the product, there's packaging that takes energy to create, transportation to get that packaging to market with the product in it, and then ultimately the product use. And sometimes for things like laundry detergent, it's actually the use at the consumer end that has way more impact than the manufacturing of the product. So you've seen a lot of campaigns recently about washing with cold water detergents. And that's because the temperature of your wash water, that energy and the energy required to heat the water is one of the biggest impacts, not so much creating the bottle of laundry detergent. So GEN members collectively have saved tons of fossil fuels from being burned through the criteria in many of those product standards. Now the Blue Angel specifically in Germany certifies all sorts of air conditioning equipment. The EcoMark in Japan and Nordic Swan certify biofuels, and Good Environmental Choice in Sweden certifies green electricity. So there are lots of options for looking for certification specific to carbon emissions and carbon footprint, but it's embodied or included in a lot of the product standards. It also means looking and avoiding toxic chemicals. 19 of the 27 GEN eco-labels currently have standards for cleaning products. One of my favorite categories, probably my kryptonite. I could talk about cleaning products on and on and on. But they have standards that certify green cleaning products, and those standards include restrictions on things like carcinogens and reproductive toxins and asthmagens, which is a growing thing for schools and universities. Green Seal in the US also requires that their cleaning products be concentrated so that you're not shipping water all over the country with the additional plastic bottles when those concentrated cleaners can be diluted on site where they're actually going to be used. And that reduces the transportation impacts and packaging as well. When you consider the life cycle, it can mean reusing materials. So the Nordic Swan Ecolabel has a standard for remanufactured toner cartridges, and there's more than 12,000 different models of toner from 13 different manufacturers last year that have the Nordic Swan Ecolabel. There's probably some in your printers today. Considering life cycle can also mean reducing waste from packaging. Eco-labeled products and services prevented tons of plastic packaging from going to the landfill. Now, single-use plastics, when you talk about hotels and restaurants, that's one of the areas that are a part of the criteria. And it also looks at how the packaging is done for the actual products themselves to be minimized, to contain recycled content, to be recyclable or compostable at the end of that product's life. So while they're not packaging specific, every product standard has some criteria to speak to the packaging and the impacts. And especially with plastic packaging, being such a hot button today, that can mean less plastic ending up in our oceans, which we keep seeing lots and lots of commercials. Forests is another area. Ecosystems in forests, the old growth habitats, the life cycle means protecting these areas. The China Environmental Labeling Program prevented thousands of tons of new paper pulp in 2017 by the criteria in their paper standards. So whether the paper is in packaging materials, whether it's in paper towels and tissue products, whether it's in copy paper, all of these GEN member standards for paper products have a lot of requirements that speak to virgin fiber, if it's going to be used, where it must come from, and preferring recycled fiber in many cases because there are fewer impacts coming from that fiber source. So if you think about all the paper that you come into contact with every day, there are many, many, many opportunities to first reduce that amount of paper, refuse the receipts and paper statements from your bank. But when you do have to buy paper products, looking for ones that have a credible eco-label is one way to reduce the impacts. Now, GEN eco-labels are also relevant to the circular economy, something important here at Google and to lots of other folks, to businesses that are focused on green building, and to corporate social responsibility. So every wall that has paint on it, paint is something that's found in almost every type of facility. Many GEN members have standards for virgin paint and for recycled paint, because no matter how hard you try, when you're done painting, there's always a little bit left over, sometimes a lot left over. And having that used latex paint sort of hanging around isn't necessarily the best use for that. So using leftover paint to make new paint and then having a credible certification can help people feel better about buying remanufactured paint that actually performs and they're not suspicious that it contains lots of strange things. So it can help to close that loop, even though many of the products in the marketplace today are still very linear from raw materials to disposal. The criteria in a lot of these GEN standards, by looking at packaging and end of life and recyclability or reuse, are encouraging our steps toward a more circular economy. And of course, we're very happy to see many, many green building rating systems include GEN member eco-labels as criteria for products and services being used within the green buildings. So how do you, as a consumer, find these eco-labels? Well, there's lots and lots and lots of websites that claim to be, here's a list of the best ones to look for, but a lot of those, like everything else, are marketing. And so when you're shopping, first just start paying attention to eco-labels. This is one of my favorite things to do. Look at the products, look at the labels that are on there, and then start to think about some questions that you can ask or check and look up. Is it an actual certification? Or is it just a logo created by the manufacturer? If it is an actual certification, can you find the standard? Do you know why that product was awarded that? If you can find the standard, how was the verification that it met the standard done? Is it just the company claim we meet the standard, or is it done by an actual third party? Once you start thinking about these sort of few fundamental questions, when you see those labels, you'll get a good feel for whether they tend to be on the credible side or the not so credible side. So yes, we're asking to do a little bit of homework, but because you vote with your wallet and you're sending that message every time you make a purchase, it is really important, and you can send that message to your favorite products and services as well. If they don't carry one of these eco-labels already, you can ask them, could you get this certification? Would you consider posting it on social media? There's been a lot of good ways to get response, not just from your cable company, to companies responding to why they don't have that. It is something that you as a consumer do have a voice and can ask more of. You also have a lot of influence about what others buy, and this is one of my favorite areas of opportunity. So most of us may recycle and practice sustainability at home, places like Google, definitely at work, but you're not home now. And because we spend a third or more of our days outside of the home, you can really think about asking some key questions of the places that you visit. So I know my kids and your kids may be at daycare or school right now. You'll go to the gym later, or maybe you already went this morning. You might go out to a restaurant for dinner, maybe take a trip this weekend and stay at a hotel. So when you're at these places, feel free to ask, what are they doing about sustainability and what green products do they buy? Now, my colleagues will tell you I am notorious for taking pictures when I see signs advertising. We proudly use green products. I look under the sink in the restrooms and I look for the eco label on the bottle of hand soap in the restroom. The roll of toilet paper often has a label with an eco label on it. So, you know, if you start to look for these things, it's, like I said, it's hard to turn it off. But you can make a difference. If you don't see it, you can ask questions. Hey, have you ever thought about purchasing green products? Or tell me more about this product that you buy. There are some greener alternatives, especially if you come from a place where that's just standard business practice in your day-to-day life. So tell them that you want them to use green products and check back with them periodically because they may need continued nudging. A personal example of this is my CrossFit gym back at home. In the restrooms, they had little tiny 99-cent bottles of liquid hand soap they were buying at the drugstore, which of course they kept trying to refill. They didn't last very long because there's lots of chalk dust and perspiration to wash off after workouts. So I finally, after a few conversations, which they probably thought were a little strange at first, got them to switch over to a bulk hand soap dispenser with foam soap, which actually has 1,400 uses worth of soap in it versus 100 or 200 in the little bottle. Because foam soap comes out pre-lathered, it actually takes less time to wash your hands. It takes less time to rinse the soap off your hands. So there's less packaging, they're saving energy, they're saving water, and they don't have to change out the soap and refill it as often. So small victory at home. Every time I go in CrossFit, wash my hands, I look at that little eco label and I know I did a good thing. So we have that same opportunity in the places that we patronize to start asking these questions. They may think you're a little odd at first, but they'll get over it. And the more eco-labeled products you buy, the more times you're asking for these things, the more we're going to see them in the marketplace, and that's a good thing. So meanwhile, we're all going to be celebrating on the 25th of October with events around the globe. Gen members are getting out, educating manufacturers, consumers, retailers in their own country and region. And I'd like to play for you just a couple of clips from longer videos that some of the Gen members have done. So we're going to see some promotions from Environmental Choice New Zealand, the Vitality Leaf in Russia, the Singapore Green Label, and the Thailand Green Label.
World Ecolabel Day is coming up this October. It's the day when we focus on products and services that carry eco-labels, badges that say the products or services are environmentally preferable.
Эко-маркировка поможет вам сделать правильный выбор.
Я еще пакет на кассе не возьму. Ответственное потребление и регулярное использование товаров с эко-маркировками позитивно влияют на нашу жизнь и помогают защитить планету. Чтобы каждый знал об этом, в октябре отмечается Всемирный день эко-маркировки. Присоединяйтесь к нам и распространите эту информацию.
In Singapore, we label something like 3,700 products using the Eco-Labeling Network. And the products actually enter 43 countries today.
Do you know the environmentally friendly products?
Yes, the environmentally friendly products is basically a product that doesn't destroy nature, like recycling.
Do you know certified green label products?
Yes, the certified green label product is a product that has received a green label for not destroying nature.
To celebrate the world's Eco-Labeling Day, use environmentally friendly products. Don't forget, green label. Hooray!
All right, and now, so here are 3 reasons why I spend so much time shopping for green products and looking at the products that we eat and use and put on our bodies. And of course, they're sports and they're used to this by now. But when we are shopping, I take the time to explain to my kids why we're buying this product over that product. And explaining, usually it's something like, well, this one has ingredients that Daddy doesn't really like. But they're pretty good with it. And I also point out, now, you know, obviously the one of them looking at product labels, that one, we're not quite there yet, but we're working toward that. And just educating them to be consumers that think about these things. Hopefully some of it's going to stick, and it's certainly easier if I can just tell them when they're shopping, look for this logo on products. And in fact, you know, for many years, Daddy, your logo's on this product. In fact, one of my favorite examples is the Subway chain of restaurants in all 25,000 Subways in North America has a Green Seal certified hand soap in their restrooms and behind the sink for the sandwich artists to wash their hands. So we'd come from a sporting event, we hit Subway to get a healthier sandwich for dinner, and the kids all go in the bathroom to wash their hands, and they see the Green Seal on the little window in the soap dispenser, and it warms my heart. So finding that, once you get them trained to start looking for it, it is possible. And of course, my daughter, for every serious picture we take, she has to take one that's a not serious picture. So that's her go-to not serious face. So at some point, we hopefully won't need as many regulations about the safety of products. We hopefully won't need as many eco-labels to guide people towards safer, greener, healthier products. And Gen members might all be out of a job, but that's okay. But just in time for World Eco-Label Day, you now know a little bit more of how to look behind the label and find out what green really means. But if you want to find out more, certainly visit globalecolabelling.net. Check out the ideas and tools for celebrating World Eco-Label Day at worldecolabelday.com. And we hope you'll be inspired to be a little bit more of a green product sleuth and help us create a more sustainable world.
I'm curious about the third-party certifiers. Is there an audit process to see that they're keeping up to standard as to doing the process of reviewing a product that meets the standard?
Yes, there are what we in the certification world call standards for standards, and standards for standard developers, and standards for certifiers. So earlier Richard mentioned in my bio, one of the things that happened recently was the United States Environmental Protection Agency led an effort to that came up with 67 draft guidelines for credible third-party standards and eco-labels. And those guidelines were divided into 4 sections. One section, so any label that the federal government was considering using would have to meet these 67 guidelines. So the first section was how you develop your standards. That's a pretty key one. And there are a number of other standards that sort of were embodied in their questions. Then there was a section on how do you do your verification and conformity assessment. In some programs, the label who develops the standard does the certification. In some, there are programs who just develop the standard, and then other third parties can do the verification work, provided they meet accreditation as the certifying body. Then the third section was the credibility of the program. Where did they get their funding? Who's on their board of directors? Are there any conflicts of interest in operating the program? And then the fourth section, which is potentially the most interesting, are these standards environmentally effective? That is, if you buy something with that eco-label on it, are you actually getting the benefits that they say you're going to get? So that speaks to addressing the key significant environmental impacts and making sure that it's not a label that is sort of dancing around the edges but not hitting to the heart of the matter. So yes, there are standards and accreditations that standard developers and third-party certifiers have to meet. And these are embodied in membership requirements for the Global Ecolabeling Network. In order to join, you have to prove that you meet all of those.
I had a question about forestry certifications. So you mentioned it, but just to make sure I caught it. So for like FSC certified wood, is that part of the Global Ecolabeling Network, why or why not, or other forestry certifications?
Right, great question, thank you. The Gen member eco-labels tend to be for programs that cover multiple types of products and services. And within the forestry space, there are 6, 8 or so labels that just certify sustainable forestry in some way, shape, or form, whether that's virgin or post-consumer. Some of them actually do put a certification on products, but many of them, none of them, to my knowledge, would be able to be a member of the Global Ecolabeling Network because they only focus on forestry. Just like there are labels that just focus on indoor air quality or just focus on sustainable flooring. In order to be a Gen member, you have to have standards for multiple product and service categories. But it is also a really relevant question because these same questions about how do they develop their standards, how do they do their conformity assessment, are they addressing the key impacts of forestry, within that space of 6 or 8 labels, some are better than others, and that's been the topic of much debate in the green building community. So yes, and that's the nice thing about these key fundamental principles is they can apply to a single attribute program, a multiple criteria but applying to a single category program, or a type 1 eco-label that addresses life cycle across multiple product categories. So just that's planting the seeds of these are the questions to be thinking about when you look behind that label, wherever it fits.
I have a question about the furniture. I haven't seen a lot of eco-label or see any, maybe I didn't pay attention enough. Can you tell me more about the furniture? Is there eco-label for the office furniture or any type of furniture products?
Yes, there are a few. Many furniture products have gone through indoor air quality certification for emissions, where the chair or the table is put into a chamber, the chamber is closed, and they actually measure what is off-gassed in terms of volatile compounds. GreenGuard is probably the most well-known for that. But there is also, for institutional furniture, the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association, BIFMA, has a program called LEVEL that is for institutional office furniture, and they have hundreds of products that have been certified at 3 different levels in the LEVEL rating system. But there are some certifications, but most of it is for institutional and office furniture. There is the Sustainable Furnishings Association for retail furniture that has some of the furniture companies as members, but that's not as, it hasn't been as visible as the BIFMA level program. But yes, it's a growing area of concern. And also, that's a market where, in addition to the emissions from the foam cushions, things like flame retardants and brominated compounds have been a sort of a campaign-specific thing because these products are used in schools and offices, and we're exposed to them on a lot of hours of the day.
You mentioned funding. And I'd be really concerned if the people getting the certifications pay for it, but at the same time, I know there's no way that I could pay for it. So what's the current thinking around that seemingly hard to solve problem?
Some of the GEN members are government sponsored programs, so there is some endowment and funding coming from that. Some of them do take a fee for service where there's a fee for getting the certification, and this is why the question about the accreditation for how they operate is so important. Usually it's a fee, the same fee charged to everybody initially, and then there may be a license fee that's based on the sales of the product. So if you sold 100 products at the end of that term of 12 months or whatever the term was, you would owe a fee for the use of the eco-label on that. So unfortunately, fees are definitely a part of it to keep the organization running. But then for a lot of the nonprofit labels, because of the 501c3 IRS tax classification, they're not allowed to have any direct financial relationship, so they may just charge a flat fee, and that's irrespective of how many units actually get sold in the marketplace. So whether the company sells 1 or they sell 1 million, the fee is an evaluation fee to determine whether or not you meet the standard and get the certification, but it's not directly linked to the success of that product in the marketplace. So there are a variety of different funding models, but and it is a challenge because, yeah, the marketplace really needs to show the value for this in the business case, and the business case is often the companies see the marketing benefit of having the third-party certification, so paying for it helps to keep the lights on and the doors open for the eco-label.
So there was a slide where you showed all different eco-labels,
yes.
Not all of them part of GEN. As a consumer, or most consumers aren't super knowledgeable of what eco-labels are part of GEN, right? Is there a trend that, you know, it's going to become more easy for consumers to know what valid eco-labels are, or how, or because most consumers wouldn't spend time to research all the different eco-labels before going to the store, right?
Right, and that's a great question, and that's part of why this education campaign and having the first annual World Eco-Label Day is something that GEN thought of, because yes, I mean, even people like me that have been immersed in this, you know, don't study all 463 on the website, but I've got the tools. If I see something at the grocery store that I haven't seen before, I'll whip out my phone, I'll start looking, okay, what is this green tree logo that I've never seen before? And usually within a few clicks on that mobile website, I can, oh, at the bottom it says funded by the such and such industry association, or I can see that we at company X think this is our company environmental program. We put this on all our products to show our commitment to the environment. So you can tease out pretty quickly if it's a credible label or not, but it is going to take a little bit of work. And without somebody coming in and policing the marketplace, the EPA effort to identify the good ones for use in federal procurement, Google's efforts by being an affiliate member of GEN to say, hey, as a company, we only want to use eco-labels that meet our strict guidelines, that sends a signal, but it also, for the time being, requires consumers taking a little bit of effort to determine whether or not that smells fishy.
And do you all have an app or anything like that?
No, I don't think the Global Ecolabeling Network has an app yet. That's probably on their wish list for funding.
I'm just curious about your knowledge of the prevalence of fraud with some of these certified products. I was working at a startup before. We were looking into organic agriculture fraud. There have been some large scandals with some products people tried to pass off as certified organic. But curious about the other products as well, how prevalent that is.
It is a problem, and that's in the 67 guidelines that I mentioned that EPA had put forth, and even in the ISO standard and the GEN requirements. Policing and enforcing your eco-label is super important, and all the time I spent at Green Seal, a big portion of that was spent on enforcement. And having the products that are Green Seal certified listed on our website was the first step in that, because consumers, especially the institutional purchasers, a company would come in, make a pitch, we would like you to buy our product, we're Green Seal certified. They would verify that on our website, and if it wasn't on our website, we would get a phone call. Hey, company X was just in my office, they said they were certified, I can't find them on your website. Now sometimes they were just super excited, we hadn't posted it on the website yet, so they were legitimately certified. But maybe they were, but 2 years ago, and we terminated their certification, but they had an old paper with the old logo or something on it. So yes, there are requirements that the mark has to be legally protected, registered as a certification mark, that you do have to take steps to police and enforce it. Usually that hierarchy would be something like they would get a phone call from me. If that didn't work, they would get a phone call or a letter from our CEO. If that didn't work, then they would get a lovely letter from a four-name law firm saying you are using a registered certification mark without license, cease and desist, or else. And sometimes it came to that. We would even police and enforce registration of domain names because a manufacturer having Green Seal .whatever that wasn't actually Green Seal, but was somehow promoting their products or leading people to think under that pretense that they were, that's a misuse of our name and mark. So yes, it's a never-ending battle. Yes, some of them are going to slip through, but every time I read one of those, I'm like you, I think, oh, that's not great, but it's great that it comes to light so they can hopefully implement better controls over it. And it speaks to the value that companies want to misuse it because they know they will be able to sell more or reach a target audience that if they don't have it, they may not be able to sell to. So it shows that there's a value for it, but yes, it is, eternal vigilance is the price of eco-labeling, I guess.
Thank you again, Mark, and thank you everyone for your questions. We really appreciate your time, so let's give it up for Mark.
Thank you.